to now pay more for bank transfers, merchant payments, and inward remittances. Listen to the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta.
It has become clear that that there's this enormous potential to increase tax revenue by bringing into the tax bracket transactions that could be best defined as being undertaken in the informal economy. After considerable deliberation, government has decided to place a levy on all electronic transactions to widen the tax net and rope in the informal sector.
Honourable members, order.
Electronic mobile money payments, bank transfers, merchant payments, and e-mode remittances will be charged at an applicable rate of 1.75%, which shall be borne by the sender, except e-mode remittances, which will be borne by the recipient. Mr. Speaker, to safeguard efforts being made to enhance financial inclusion and protect the vulnerable, all transactions that add up to 100 Ghana cedis or less per day, which is approximately 3,000 Ghana cedis per month, will be exempt from this levy. A portion of the proceeds from the e-levy will be used to support entrepreneurship, youth employment, cybersecurity, infrastructure, among others. Mr. Speaker, taxi baako nyinaa betua. This tax is one, and we shall all pay. Mr. Speaker, this new policy also comes into effect once appropriation is passed on 1st January 2022. Government will work with all industry partners to ensure that their systems and payment platforms are configured to implement this policy.
They will make money from there.
So that is the first highlight. The second highlight, government has scrapped the 50% port clearing discount introduced in 2019, despite the vehement protests and threats from the mainly from the Ghana Union of Traders Association, GUTA.
After 2.5 years of operation, the temporary benchmark discount policy on imports introduced as a stopgap measure has been reviewed to make it more efficient and better targeted. This is consistent with government policy to promote local industry and improve foreign exchange earnings. We are committed to a program of turning our enterprising traders into manufacturers of widgets, tools, and other machinery necessary as inputs for our industrial growth.
So that is the second highlight. The third highlight, government has now abolished all tolls on public roads and bridges.
For decades, governments after governments imposed and maintained tolls on some public roads to raise funds for road construction and maintenance. This is the situation in many countries. However, over the years, the tolling points have become impacted negatively on productivity. The congestion generated at the tolling points, besides creating these inconveniences, also leads to pollution in and around the vicinities. To address these challenges, government has abolished all tolls on public roads and bridges. This takes effect immediately the budget is approved on appropriation. The toll collection personnel will be reassigned. The expected impact on productivity and reduce environmental pollution will more than offset the revenue foregone by removing the tolls. Tolls, Mr. Speaker, would be abolished on all public roads.
So that's another big one for you, announced by the Finance Minister today. Let's look at the fourth highlight, and this has to do with employment for young people, the youth. The Finance Minister announced a new initiative called the Youth Start, which offers a 1 billion cedi annually each year to the youth to create 1 million jobs.
We continue to have a huge number of our young people without jobs. Mr. Speaker, this budget is redefining our development paradigm by focusing on the private sector, particularly on entrepreneurship development. We will build an entrepreneurial nation by aggressively implementing programs that empowers the majority of our young people to employ their God-given talents to take risks and become job creators instead of job seekers. In the pursuit of this objective, we will address the challenges our existing and aspiring entrepreneurs face. These challenges include access to credit and finance, regulatory and tax burdens, lack of skills, as well as mentorship. We will do this whilst intensifying our efforts to support the private sector to expand and create jobs. Mr. Speaker, this understanding of the youth employment challenge, as well as extensive consultations of stakeholders, including youth associations and educational institutions across the country, have led to the development of what we call the Youth Start Initiative. In addition, Mr. Speaker, our local banks have agreed to a package that will result in increasing their SME portfolio up to 5 billion Ghana cedis over the next 3 years.
Well, that is the finance minister there with the fourth highlight. Let's look at the fifth highlight. The fifth highlight is the establishment of the National Home Ownership Fund that will support mortgage schemes. Well, the reaction in Parliament, as you can imagine, has been pretty strong, with the finance minister laying out what that tax is. The minority has been particularly scathing of that particular introduction. Listen to the ranking, the minority's spokesperson on finance, the former deputy finance minister, Kesa Toforsi, speaking to the press shortly after the minister laid out the details in the budget.
This Christmas, ladies and gentlemen, will go down as the most bitter and painful for Ghanaians, as they will struggle to put food on the table for their families due to the draconian fiscal and tax policies that has been introduced by the Akufo-Addo Bawumia government. We are hearing that they are going to introduce the electronic transaction levy, affecting mobile money taxes, mobile money transactions, and bank transfers, and an inflows in remittance. So simply put, what this government seeks to do is that from January 2021, January 2022, every single remittance from anybody living abroad to your mother, to your father, and for the purposes of your investment is going to attract taxes from this administration. We think this is not acceptable, and we will advise ourselves when the time comes. Again, we are seeing that they are going to introduce a special tax on mobile money. We have served notice through our minority leader that the minority caucus of Ghana's parliament will stand by Ghanaian, the ordinary Ghanaian, in opposing this Momo tax. These new tax measures will bring great suffering to Ghanaians. We wish to assure the people of Ghana that we will vigorously oppose the killer taxes and will ensure that any one of them that will adversely affect the lifestyle of Ghanaians will be rejected.
Well, his colleague Isaac Adongo blamed Vice President Bawumia for imposing what he calls e-Bawumia pickpocketing.
I knew that this digitization was going to end up in e-Bawumia pickpocketing. Today, as you are here working, immediately your money gets into the bank. Unless you go to the bank to withdraw the money in cash, any attempt to spend that money through any electronic means, whether you are transferring directly to somebody, you are transferring to your Momo wallet, you are paying out to your grandmother in the village, Bawumia is waiting to take his share before you spend that money. And yet you have paid taxes on that income. So you are paying double taxes because your income is taxed. The money that they now give to you as your net salary is also taxed if you spend the money by any electronic means. So what it definitely means is that we have reversed the electronic platform that we are creating by over 25 years. I will always go to the bank and so I don't pay. It is the same way you are likely not to be using your platforms to spend your money, but will be queuing at the bank because you want to avoid double taxation of the same money that you pay the taxes on. The other challenge is that if you bought an item and there was a VAT component on it, which is a tax, and you decided to pay the person by a bank transfer or by electronic means, you will pay tax again on the VAT.
Well, joining me on the phone right now is the chairman of the Finance Committee in Parliament. The budget has now been referred to that committee, and he joins us on the phone. He's also a former Deputy Finance Minister. In the studio with me is Dr. Casey Latofosing. He is the ranking on the Finance Committee in Parliament and is also a former Deputy Finance Minister. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Evans.
I want to get some clarity very quickly from Mr. Kwarteng. Mr. Kwarteng, so the electronic levy that has just been imposed today, please explain. When it says 1.75% on all electronic transactions, is it a levy on the fees that you are charged, or it is a levy that you pay in addition to the fee that you are charged already?
Well, it's difficult for me to answer this question. It has to be remembered that this budget has just been presented to Parliament and referred to our committee. The particular tax measure very details as to what is exempted, what is not exempted, and exactly how the tax will take effect. My advice would be that we wait for the legislation, and then Parliament would even have the liberty to look at the legislation and to say if certain adjustments will make that particular tax measure more helpful to the economy. But as we speak, for we in Parliament, I would say we're not able to answer such detailed questions.
Dr. Tofosing, in the statement that the finance minister read, though, he gave a hint of what this will be and what you're actually paying. He says this will be borne by, quote, it will be borne by the sender. And it says, except in what remittances. Does that offer any clarity to you on the question I just asked?
Evans, let me say, to start with, that I'm saddened. I'm saddened in the sense that the amount of taxes that this government has introduced today beats my imagination. I have the president talk about digitalization. I never thought that he's going to introduce a digital tax. Today, what this budget seeks to do is to introduce those transactions. It said they are imposing a tax on bank transfers. They are imposing the tax on the amount that you send, mobile money, the sender, whatever you send out, they're imposing a tax on it. What surprises me is that, Evans, to start with, if you are to say that you are imposing to pay 17,500 Ghana cedis because the minister had said that they are going to impose
this right now, there's a fee you pay for that transfer. I mean, that's why I asked that clarity. Isn't it possible that it's on that fee and not?
If he knows about this, he would have said that fees and Ministry of Finance and Bank of Ghana certainly would have, and the GDI certainly would have said that pay. So the sender is not paying 1.75 on the fees; is paying 1.75 on the transaction.
Okay, so let me bring, because that's an important point. Let me bring back Kweku Kwarteng. Mr. Kwarteng, on that point that Dr. Forson just made. Isn't that the only plausible explanation? Because the finance minister then tells us that if you are, it introduces a monetary exemption, that if you are paying, for example, all transactions that add up to 100 CD or less, they are exempt, right? So doesn't that then mean that it is on the money that you are transferring? So that if I'm transferring 50,000 CDs, I am paying 1.75 on the 50,000 CD. That doesn't that offer that clarity?
I think it does. I mean, there's no doubt that this tax measure is on the transaction, and that is why, as you have rightly explained, up to 100 Ghanaian cedis is exempt from this tax. So that is the immediate meaning we get, and I have no doubt about that. What I am saying is that the policy as was read today itself does not constitute the measure. It represents government's intention to impose this tax. Once the legislation comes, we would know the exact details and what other exemptions are within the tax measure. But, it's important that we put things in perspective. I've heard many people decry government borrowing. We all have seen the fiscal gap that we saw in 2020. We know that as a result, government has defined in the medium term how we intend to close the gap between our revenues and our expenditures. Now, those who are condemning government revenue measures, beyond, of course, being the opposition, when I hear my colleagues, they're almost jubilating that government has introduced such a measure, and to the extent that they believe it makes government less popular. When I listen to my colleagues, I hear jubilation. Look, this country must be built, and those who are saying that such an introduction is inappropriate must tell us how we deal with the fallout of the recent expenditures. The proposition that government should cut expenditure is something you clearly see in this budget. The total expenditure program has been underspent under this budget. These are some of the observations that we should begin to make. The goods and services is lower than programmed. I see clearly in this budget an attempt by government to signal to investors into this economy that going forward we will protect the fiscal. I think there should be an invitation to everybody, including our colleagues in the minority, to engage with that question. What? We want the CD to drop and attend with that drop, increase in poverty. We don't want that. What really are the alternatives? And when I have heard people say the alternative is cut expenditure, we are seeing expenditure rationalization in the budget. So, but going forward, where should we cut? I go back to 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016 budget statements, and I see the cry by the then administration about money not being available for discretionary expenditure. I'm only making this point, and I close on this, that we cannot continue to criticize government for rising debt levels and at the same time seek to jubilate over what we consider would politically be unattractive for government because government is trying to close the gap. I think we cannot have it both ways.
Doc, I hear you say this is a necessary evil. Is it not?
Evans, let me say something. First, I want Kweku Kwarteng, my colleague in Parliament, be aware that we in the minority, we are not jubilating. In fact, we are sad. We think the ordinary Ghanaian has been burdened with this budget. We think the introduction of this budget is going to introduce hardships and poverty. In fact, we have said that it is not only the e-taxes or digital taxes that we are talking about. If the introduction of the benchmark values alone is going to make life painful for the ordinary Ghanaian, how can I sit here and be jubilating? I cannot jubilate. I'm against it, and to be on, put me on record that we in the minority, we are not jubilating. We are saddened. We are worried. We care for the ordinary Ghanaian because this is going to affect us. Even to the details. Government is telling us that going forward, we should pay our taxes through mobile money. Now, how can I pay my taxes through mobile money and tax me, the person that I'm sending mobile money to the government, tax me additional 1.75%? Does that not amount to double taxation? You are telling me that going forward, instead of us taking money, cash from the bank, we should do transfers. You are telling me that anytime I do transfer, buy ticket, do whatever it takes, you are going to tax me 1.75%. What are you talking about? Evans, this is not acceptable. Certainly not acceptable. You know what this budget is going to introduce? It is going to erase the cashless economy that we are talking about. People are now going to keep their monies at home. People are now going to carry money at the back of their cars. People are now going to trade with cash, because any transaction you engage with the bank, you are going to pay transfer tax. Bawumia, transfer tax. The digital tax that we are talking about. So when he was talking about digital economy, I never at any point in time felt that he's going to bring digital tax. Today, we are confronted with a situation that the very thing that we are doing to actually help cashless economy, today we are erasing all of that. I am saddened as a Ghanaian. I am worried as an MP, because my constituents out there will be done badly by this policy. But
your constituents,
this is not a good policy.
The finance minister said this is targeted at the rich and they must contribute.
Evans.
The constituents, your constituents, I bet, and a lot of the poor will not do transactions that will require hefty payments. You mentioned
Evans.
$1 million.
Evans.
You mentioned 100,000. 1.75 of that is huge. But
Evans.
if you're doing 200 cedis,
Evans, 200 cedis, you are going to pay the tax.
yes.
Okay, so it may be that it's 200 cedis. And maybe to you, Evans, is not small, it's a peanut. But to that person in my constituency, that 1.75% is big money for him. Evans, what is going to happen here is that.
So by the way, so
if
if your constituency is transferring 200 cedi,
yes,
he's paying 3 cedi 50 pesos.
Do you know 3 cedis?
In addition to the 3 cedi that is already there.
Exactly.
Because it's already
that 5 cedis is a chop money for the day.
Yeah. In fact, that's
that 5
almost,
cedis is a chop money for the day. And Evans, let me say this. These taxes are going to introduce distortions in the economy. They are going to introduce serious distortions in the economy to the extent that businesses are going to suffer. Let me show you why businesses are going to suffer. The companies deal with transfers. And the transfers were certainly going to increase their cost of doing business, because now every transfer the companies does, they are going to pay 1.75%.
Including the payment of salaries.
Including your wages and salaries.
Salaries, yes.
So if the person go to the bank and then he says that, let's say Joy FM, if Joy FM is paying you, Evans, your salary, they are going to pay 1.75% of your salary to the GRA.
So assuming that for a company like us, for all the employees, we pay 1 million cedi worth of salary every month. It means that every month the company is paying 1.75% of that.
Exactly. And you know what that means? You are increasing the cost of Joy FM. And Joy FM is certainly going to pass on that cost to their client. And then it is going on and to introduce distortions within the economy, to the extent that government is not going to get this money. It is the same vice president who went to Ghana, the Institute of Surgeons, Physicians and Surgeons, when he said that going forward, he is reducing the benchmark values in a way that it will attract volumes into the port. And going forward, that volumes will bring the revenue. What has changed? What has changed that not long ago he said this very thing? I think I sent the audio to you. Today, he has reversed that. We've been told by the importers that this singular measure is going to introduce some increases in prices of certain food items. And including
this is the benchmark. I'll come to that because that's significant. But let me quickly get Kwaku Kwarteng's thoughts on this. Mr. Kwarteng.
When I say that my colleagues are not sincere and that they are jubilating, Honorable Atuforsen disagrees with me. To start with, these measures were brought to Parliament by the Finance Minister on behalf of the government headed by Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. When you see his constant references to Dr. Bawumia, it is because he believes that this is an electoral matter, and that to the extent that Dr. Bawumia may be a candidate, he should attribute it to him. That is dishonesty to start with.
Kweku is missing the point.
Please.
In the end, but
when you were speaking, he was quiet. I mean, so
yeah, I was quiet. If you listen to me, that's the first point. We have to. If you're going to deal with heal this country, we need to be honest with ourselves. 2, when you start calling it digitization tax, look, digitization is a very broad policy of doing things electronically. And because of transfers, electronic transfers that are going to be taxed, you decide to bastardize a digitization policy that as a country we should embrace. I know you're not being sincere. The third point, and I close on this, is that, look, where are the alternatives? If we didn't do this, it would have been more popular politically for government to say, look, I'm not introducing any tax measure. We would let the deficit expand. We will let the debt grow. Politically, it is easier. But in the end, the consequences of macroeconomic instability will be borne by the poor people. We should be honest with these debates, and those who are saying that this particular tax, where it has been placed, is wrong, ought to be telling us what the alternative is. Lastly, Evans, I think we should wait for the legislation, because some of the issues you raised here in terms of payment of salary and all that, for all you may know, the legislation would exempt some transfers. Let's have the patience and get the legislation and see what exactly it is before we start jubilating over a policy we think will make government unpopular.
What about the possibility of this being counterproductive, especially with a government that is heavily invested in digitalization and a cashless economy? If bank transfers, as has been suggested, and the finance minister was very clear on this, is going to be affected, why would I pay? And again, if you're transferring huge sums of money, you're going to pay a lot of money on this. People will simply, as you can see this happening, people will simply dodge this by simply carrying the cash and in their boots and paying with it because they want to circumvent this. That can prove counterproductive, can it not?
It may well be, and I don't dispute that, except that government, upon its analysis, has considered that this is the best place to place this tax now. Once the tax is deployed, I'm sure government itself will continue to do the review. What I am saying is that if government did a review and consider that changes ought to be made, I'm sure government will make them. But that is the job of an economy manager. You make decisions as best as you can, monitor your own policies, and to see if they are counterproductive, you will be able to change that. But we cannot pretend that not doing any revenue measure under this budget was an option. And for those who are saying that it ought not to have been on e-transactions, they must tell us where the tax ought to have been. Or if they think that we should have done nothing and allow the fiscal difference between expenditure and revenues to remain as they have been, they should be able to say that honestly and openly, so we know what exactly they are thinking.
Dr. Forson, that's the first question the fair question to ask you. If not on e-transactions, what should it be on? Because I think there's a consensus that we are not raising enough revenue,
Evans,
and we have to bridge the deficit.
First of all, you need to understand, why are we where we are? Was it avoidable or is self-inflicted? Yes, indeed, it's self-inflicted. I do not believe that the ordinary Ghanaian should be the one to suffer for someone's mess and mismanagement. I do not believe that. Evans, I say this for a reason. You are a senior journalist in this country. Have you ever heard the President, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, speak about digital economy? Never. Have you ever heard the President speak about what we call the benchmark values? Never. Who is the one championing these two items? And then today, I heard my colleague Kweku Kwatin talk about e-transaction levy. What does the E mean? It's electronic payment. Is that not part of digitization? And if I call it digital tax, is it wrong for me to call it digital tax? Why is he running away from what he used to do yesterday?
But it has a name.
But the name is a digital tax. That is what it is.
But why don't you call it by the name?
Electronic transaction is digital. That is what it is. So it is a digital tax imposed on us by the digital man. That is a fact. And Evans, let me say something. I've said here, and I know Kweku Kwatin very well. We've worked together for years. Not long ago, when budget policy is announced by a finance minister, we debated. Why is he telling us to wait today? Why is he telling us
for the
to
clarity?
Wait?
I think
for what clarity? The clarity is in the document.
The GRA will come. You know, that's what always happens when government imposes fresh tax.
I do not believe that our finance minister spoke in an ambiguous manner.
But Dr. Forson, when you know, each time, regardless of how clear it is, we know that definitely the GRA will come with the specifics.
That does not stop us from interrogating the matter before us. So he's asking us to keep quiet and for us to wait until the tax policy is submitted to us.
But to the
harm would have been done.
But to the question,
harm would have been done.
But to the question, I mean, if not on e-transactions,
yes.
What?
If not on e-transaction, cut expenditure. There are a lot of frivolous expenditure even at the office of the president. There are a lot of frivolous expenditure there. Cut it.
Would that
Look,
would that
let me
solve
tell
the
you something.
deficit? The deficit is huge.
Let me tell you something. Now who costs them? Now who costs them? So you can't introduce in one point an expansionary measures, inflict serious wounds on the ordinary Ghanaian by increasing the debt burden, and all of a sudden turn around and communicate to us that today, even if you are going to pay your tax through Momo, you will be taxed on the tax that you are paying. To the extent that if you are buying anything, you are going to, electronically, you are going to pay a tax. Evans, let me talk about the remittances issue. It is one thing that really, really surprises me. Our brothers and sisters living abroad contribute towards the building of this our economy. Most of our homes, indeed, are run by the remittances that comes into the country. Our brothers and sisters in the diaspora are building homes in our country. Today you are saying every remittance inward, they are going to pay taxes on top of what we call their charges. What is happening? What is happening? You know what they are trying to do is going to create a lot of inefficiencies to the extent that now if care is not taken, remittances will reduce because it will go underground. Black marketing will be on the rise because people will try to avoid that kind of payment. Evans, if someone is to remit $1 million home, that person is going to pay $17,500.
Yeah,
$17,500.
If the person can do $1 million, that person is rich. The person should be able to contribute.
I'm using that for illustration. But for somebody may be able to do 1 million, another person may be able to do 100,000. So if you are doing $100,000, 100,000 you are paying $1,750. Do you know what it means?
Very quickly on
It's
those,
a lot of money.
Very quickly for two quick things, and then we could wrap up on this. Let's talk about the government decision to scrap the clearing discounts, the benchmark. The finance was clear today that the government has shifted this policy, and the focus is helping the local manufacturer to grow. Isn't that a plausible reason why this should go?
So, at the time that our vice president had held the town hall meeting with members of the economic management team, was that very argument, wasn't it relevant? Wasn't it relevant? Why the sudden change?
Because it wasn't
Why
working.
the sudden change?
It wasn't working, obviously.
So has he come out to apologize to the people of Ghana that we are sorry because what I thought about is not working? First of all, you should admit that he's wrong. Because you know what this has happened. Normally, I know Ghana. That very reduction did not reduce prices of certain goods and services. In fact, it may take about a year for it to adjust. Today, this singular reversal is going to increase the prices of those commodities. Effective today. Do you know why effective today? The traders out there will adjust because if care is not taken, they will not be able to recover their working capital to be able to go back and buy the same quantities that they buy because their cost would have gone up. So I'm sorry to say this. This singular policy is the one that is going to affect ordinary Ghanaian even more than the fuel price increases. Because items such as rice, sugar, milk, some of the things that they import into the economy, all those items are going to go up a minimum by 25 to 30%. This is.
But you must also acknowledge that the Ghanaian manufacturer will benefit.
Well, it's difficult to conclude on that.
It's very straightforward.
It is difficult to conclude on that because first of all, you have to find out whether the item they are bringing in, for instance, the building materials we are talking about, prices of iron rods is going to go up. Prices of roofing sheet is going to go up. Cement product, because most of them bring clinker into the country, is going to go up. Does anybody manufacture clinker here in Ghana that we are going to buy off and is going to benefit from that? So first of all, you have to understand whether those items are produced locally or not. So if they are produced locally and we are able to produce them sufficient enough to be able to deal with the situation, then hallelujah. But until then, it's a difficult.
Very quick reaction to the final point about the scrapping of all tolls on roads and bridges. You must applaud that, definitely, because that's a burden lessening measure.
Evans, to the extent that scrapping this toll booth will ease traffic, I will always be happy about. But please, don't jubilate yet on the back of the revenue, because I'm aware that government is going to increase fees and charges to the extent that when you go to, and it's in the budget statement.
It says it will be reviewed automatically in reflection of
15%. So what is happening, first of all, is 15%, and subsequent years, it will be adjusted according to inflation.
But I won't pay tolls anymore. So.
Okay, so what is happening is that when you go to DVLA to do your roadworthiness certificate, the price is embedded.
We don't know that for sure.
The fees and charges are coming before Parliament. This is what is there.
Well, to be fair, the finance minister said in the budget today that it will be reviewed.
Yes.
And
he said 15%.
Yes.
First of all, he said it's going to be 15% increase. So fees and charges, all those little fees and charges. And remember, all these fees and charges manifest in the economy as taxes. They create distortions and deadweight costs. I'm sorry to say that it's businesses that is going to suffer as a result of some of these tax policies that has been introduced by this government.
Now, Mr. Kwarteng, first to the issue around the benchmark values that we know the government has set today, those discounts are now being reversed to the full 100%. Of course, the local manufacturers are jubilating. Guta and others have said that this will have dire consequences. If you do the cost-benefit analysis, was this the smartest move?
I think it's really good that government has done this revision. When this benchmark policy was deployed, I was then in the Ministry of Finance. The objective was to make sure that the rising prices of items that Ghanaians buy on the market would be stemmed somewhat. Now, the policy again has been implemented over a period. Over the period that it was being implemented, local manufacturers always said that the impact on us, the local manufacturers, is negative. So government, and for every budget, they have cried. What I see is government saying, I am not removing the policy for everything, but I would select those items for which we have sufficient quantities within our local manufacturing sector. We cannot be happy for our local manufacturers, that we should position ourselves that because we are in opposition, that every move must be criticized. That we cannot for one say that this is good for local manufacturing. I'm sure listeners will make the decision for themselves. The second point is about these road tolls. Look, government decision was very clear that we're not going to have the tolls any longer. So you just drive through. There are no tolls. The question of fees and charges has to do with the fees and the charges that government departments and various state entities charge for the services they render. Traditionally, these fees and charges have been revised upwards. In fact, now there are some of these levies that have not, fees and charges that have not been increased for 5 years. So this, when the minister mentions 15%, even I do know that again, that would come to us and we would know. He has already, Honorable Atiforson has already suggested that it will be put on DVLA. When I say he's jubilating over anything he thinks is makes government unpopular, he disagrees. But you know, who told him that DVLA fees would go up by the margins that government would have gotten if we maintain this? Look, what I would say in conclusion is this. This is our own economy. It's our own country. We know that we have a fiscal pressure to deal with. Government has chosen to do some balancing act, removing here, cutting here. If anybody thinks that we should have done nothing and allow the gap to remain like that so the city would fall, it's up to them. If anybody thinks that it is, I'm closing. If anybody thinks that it is okay to do the tax, but it should be on something else, they should tell us what that something else is. We are not allowed to just condemn everything and get away with it saying that we love Ghanaians. That is not love. That is politics.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to...
Evans, to conclude with...
a few 30 seconds.
Evans, for us to place the magnitude of the taxes in perspective, let us understand that the government had planned that this year, 2021, the total tax collection is 55 billion. Next year, they are saying they are going to collect taxes, 80 billion. So what it means is that one single year, they are going to increase the taxes by 25 billion Ghana cedis.
But you should be applauding government
25 billion.
But you should be applauding government for that.
Evans, 25 billion. You see, it is not just about collecting taxes. Let us be aware that there's a limit that the economy can take those taxes. And if care is not taken, you break the camel's back. And this is what is happening.
Okay.
We are in a bad day. This is not good for us as a country. We should be thinking about it.
Kesa Tufosing and the former Deputy Minister Kwaku Kwarteng will both join us on PM Express. We'll have more time to break this down even further. Join us then at 9 p.m. on the Journey channel. Dr. Tufosing, I'm grateful that you join us. Also to you, Kwaku Kwarteng. You're still here on Newsnight. Still ahead, we're getting wave of strong